going to answer a question that was sent to Generation Iron. I'm going to answer this question from a viewer of Generation Iron. This is an actual question. I'm going to read it right off the page. It says, "Hi, family." I'm not sure what he means by that, but in any case, in India, at some days there are some religious pujas. So on that day, we can't eat non-vegetarian food like egg, chicken, etc. So if a person is on a strict diet, then what must he or she eat to substitute for egg, chicken on those days? Please, Jerry, sir, make a video on this for the Indian Generation Iron family. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm making a video to answer your question. So uh, I'm not that familiar. I think puja, what he mentions is the pujas. I think that's some sort of religious ritual in the Hindu religion and possible other religions. I'm not that familiar. Religion is not an area of my expertise. But in any case, I assume that in this particular phase or during this ritual, that you're limited to only vegetarian foods. You cannot eat any animal products. So on that basis, the answer is actually very simple. I assume what the question pertains to is this person is involved in weight training. He doesn't want to lose any muscle mass. So, he's afraid that he can't get enough protein from straight vegan sources or vegetable sources. So, how can he get his protein to maintain muscle while he's observing this particular phase? And the answer is actually quite simple because what they have, because of the, let's say, increased popularity of vegetarianism, in the past couple of years, they've offered vegetarian protein supplements. For example, and I've written about this in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, I wrote about a study that compared pea and rice protein, pea meaning PEA, not PEE, it's PEA, P from peas. They compared pea and rice protein to whey protein, and what they found in this study was that whey protein is superior for building muscle because it's much higher in essential amino acids. And essential amino acids, those are the amino acids that must be ingested in food. They cannot be made in the body. Now, whey protein is a particularly good source of essential amino acids, and it contains a very high. It's a 13% content of leucine, which is the key amino acid when it comes to promoting muscle protein synthesis. Now, here's the interesting part. What they found in that study was that if you have an equal amount of whey protein and, let's say, pea or rice protein, the whey protein always was superior in stimulating muscle protein synthesis. The reason being that, again, it was higher in essential amino acids and had more leucine. However, when they did the second part of the study, they gave the subjects a greater amount of the whey of the pea or rice protein, so that the amount of essential amino acids and leucine was similar to what would be included in the whey protein. So in other words, I had to give them extra amounts of the vegetarian protein source to equal the amount of amino acids found in whey. But when they did that, and this was a young men involved in weight training, when they equalized the essential amino acid content and the leucine content, the effects on muscle protein synthesis were exactly the same. So, the conclusion, you want to draw a line under that. What does this mean? It means that if you use these kind of vegetarian protein sources, and that includes pea, rice, and hemp proteins, you have to take a little bit more of them. Let's say that, for stimulating muscle protein synthesis, if you're a young person, you could take about 25 grams of whey protein and get a maximal muscle protein synthesis. If you're over age 40, you double that. It takes 40 grams of whey protein to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. However, if you use one of these vegetarian sources of protein, you got to start right off with, even if you're a young person, you got to, because of the less amount of essential amino acid and leucine in these vegetable proteins, you got to start right off with 40 grams. You got to take about minimal 40 grams of these vegetarian type protein powders to equal the same muscle protein synthesis effect of whey, right? Okay, so that's basically the answer to your question. I assume that this pooches, or whatever it's called, doesn't last that long. So you can continue to you can eat your vegetables, and if you feel the need for extra protein, just go online and purchase one of these pea, rice, and hemp. There's another vegetarian protein I'll discuss more in detail in a second, and that's soy protein. Soy protein's a little different than the others, and I'll explain why in a second. By the way, soy protein is a complete protein. This is a problem. A lot of people, I just want to segue into talking about vegan diets in general. There's a consensus among bodybuilders and websites and bodybuilding articles. The idea is that, you can't really build big muscles unless you eat animal protein, meat, fish, eggs, cheese, that type of thing. And of course, whey protein, all that. In other words, you can't build big muscles eating vegetarian sources of food. Now, you have to understand what muscles want is amino acids, and they have to be in a certain quantity related to the, let's say, the percentage of essential amino acids and leucine. This is the key to building muscle. Your body doesn't really care where the amino acids come from. The reason why whey and animal protein foods build more muscle is that they have higher amounts of essential amino acids, higher amounts of leucine, and the protein contained in animal foods is in a concentrated form. So you get more bang for the buck. In other words, you have one serving of, let's say, meat, fish, or eggs can give you a substantial amount of protein. To get that same amount of protein from a vegan or a diet, you'd have to eat quite a bit of food. And the problem with that is that vegan diets, in fact, this is a health feature of vegan diets, is that they're high in fiber. Now, fiber is extremely healthy for you. I'm going to have a huge article on fiber in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, where I'm going to discuss aspects of fiber that almost nobody knows about. Nobody knows. I've never seen this stuff anywhere. I've discovered it. It's like very, very esoteric. You don't see it in articles. It's going to be very interesting to anyone who wants to put on muscle and lose fat. But my point being, vegan or vegetarian diets are high in fiber. Fiber is filling. So the point is, one of the reasons why it's difficult to build muscle on a vegan diet is because you have to eat a lot of protein, a lot of vegan foods, a large variety of vegan foods, because of the fact that fiber, the fiber is going to fill you up, making it difficult to eat the quantity of food you need to consume to get sufficient protein to promote muscle growth. Now, as I said earlier, if you opt to use one of these vegan protein sources that I mentioned, such as pea, rice, and hemp, it's a done deal. I mean, now you're getting enough. You're getting enough amino acids. You're getting enough leucine, so you can be a successful vegan body. There's nothing holding you back. There is two supplements, however, I'd strongly recommend. Well, there's a couple actually, but in relation to strictly bodybuilding, two supplements I'd strongly recommend for vegan body. Hold on, let me stop at this point before I mention the supplements. I have to differentiate. There's various types of what they call vegetarian diets. A lot of bodybuilders call themselves vegetarians who still consume milk and eggs. It's called a lacto-ovo vegetarian. If you're one of those types who still eat certain protein foods, animal protein foods, meat, fish, eggs, a person who eats fish but doesn't eat meat is called a pescatarian. Now, you're still getting all the good protein you need, and none of this applies. In other words, you don't need to take any protein powder. You don't need to take anything because you're already getting great sources of protein. That's the good part. The bad part is if you eat any kind of animal protein food, including whey protein, you're not really a vegan because the very definition of vegan is living on fruits and vegetables. But, that's a matter of semantics more than anything else. When I'm talking here, the advice I'm giving here applies, I want to make it clear, to strict vegans, people that are only living on fruits and vegetables. They're not eating any animal protein foods at all. So I just wanted to clarify that. So I was mentioning that what I think vegan bodybuilders should do, essential supplements if you want to build muscle, are creatine, because creatine is found largely in animal foods. The two best sources being red meat, and the number one source being herring, a form of that is of course fish. And you can't get that in vegan diets. And in fact, when they give creatine supplements to vegans, they make more gains on creatine than any other population. If you give a vegan person involved in weight training, if you give them a creatine supplement and they've never taken creatine, the amount of gains they make is almost comparable to what they would make with steroids. I'm not going to say it's as good as steroids, but it's remarkable. Let me put it that way. Whereas you give the same creatine to somebody who's used to eating a lot of animal foods and especially meat, the gains are going to be minimal. You're still going to get benefit from creatine, but not nearly as much as a vegan would. So that's one point. Another supplement that I think could be useful for a vegan bodybuilder is something called beta-alanine, which I'll probably do a video on in the future. I was actually, I think, as far as I know, I was the first person to write about beta-alanine as a supplement right before it was introduced to the commercial market. And I'll talk about that more, but the point being that you want to have beta-alanine because it's a precursor for a substance called carnosine. Carnosine consists of beta-alanine and histidine bonded together. It's called a dipeptide. Carnosine is very important intramuscular buffer. It helps to soak up acid that builds up in the muscle when you work out and produces muscle fatigue. And carnosine itself, the actual word carno is actually taken from I believe it's a Latin word meaning meat, because it was originally discovered in meat in 1900. So obviously the best sources of natural carnosine are meat. So clearly a vegan who's not eating any meat would probably benefit by a supplement that will increase carnosine in the muscles. And in fact, studies have shown that vegans tend to have low levels of carnosine in their body. Carnosine, besides being a muscle buffer, does a number of other things, which I will talk about in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. It's very, very detailed and a little bit complex, but I'll just say that it has what they call it prevents advanced glycation end products. Glycation is a process involved where sugar is deposited in protein structures and it weakens and ages the structures. A major cause of the stiffness of aging, how when you see a lot of old people that get stiff and they look like they have no flexibility, what you're looking at is a long-term buildup of advanced glycation end products. It also increases in diabetics because of the lack of glucose control. And because of that, diabetics have a 5 times greater increased chance of mortality compared to somebody without diabetes. And I'm talking about uncontrolled diabetes. Now, what other supplements? If you're a vegan, what are the nutrients that you have to be careful of? Well, the main one is vitamin B12, because vitamin B12 is only found in animal protein foods. It's essential that if you're a vegan, you better take a B12 supplement, and don't believe the bullshit. It makes me a little angry because I've seen a couple of these vegan advocate videos on YouTube and elsewhere where they talk about how it's a fallacy, that vegans can get enough B12 from their vegetables. That really pisses me off because that's a complete lie. The type of B12, let's say the form of it found in these vegetables, is not absorbable by the human body. And it really annoys the hell out of me that they're telling that, because a lot of people can get some serious neurological problems if you lack B12. The good news is that B12 is stored in the body. Usually the average person has enough B12 stored in their liver to last about 5 years before symptoms arise of a B12 deficiency. Some studies have shown that as many as 50% of vegans are deficient in B12. Among other things, B12 helps to maintain the white matter in your brain. In other words, without B12, as you age, your brain shrinks. Now, that's not a good thing because there's already plenty of dumb people around, and you don't want to have dumber people. So what I'm saying is all vegans need to take a B12 supplement, and there are B12 supplements available that are suitable for vegans. They're basically synthetic B12, and they're not made from any animal source, so they're great to take and they're fine. Don't believe the nonsense about vegans don't need to take B12. It's bullshit. Another thing, especially for women, if you're a female who's a vegan, you have to also be careful about iron, because there is iron available in fruits and vegetables, mainly vegetables, but the type of iron found in there is what they call it's non-heme iron is the actual technical term. And unfortunately, vegetables also contain elements like phytic acid and oxalic acid that tend to bind to the iron found in vegetables, where it's a little bit difficult to absorb. A good example of this is spinach. You know, you might remember Popeye used to take that can of spinach and he'd get super strong. Well, spinach is one of the best natural sources of iron. The problem is it also contains these elements. So spinach is not as good a source of iron as you would expect it to be. However, if you take vitamin C with, let's say, spinach, the vitamin C does something where it has, it's a little complex chemistry, but what it does is allow the non-heme iron to be far better absorbed, 300% greater absorption. So for people that don't want to take an iron supplement, if you're a vegan and you want to depend on vegetables, it might be a good idea to take a little vitamin C supplement when you eat these vegetables. It'll increase the absorption of iron. This doesn't apply to anybody who eats animal protein foods, because the animal protein foods contain a form of iron called heme iron, which is highly absorbable. So this doesn't apply. This only applies to vegans. Also, vegans need to be careful about calcium. Again, this applies especially to women who are prone to a calcium deficiency disease called osteoporosis if they don't get enough calcium. So, you know, the lack of dairy foods inherent in a vegan style of eating can set you up for a long-term calcium deficiency and osteoporosis. A lot of women aren't aware of this. Osteoporosis begins at age 30, where the calcium from the found in the bones is leached out because your muscles need calcium to contract, and calcium is needed for nerve transmission. If you're not getting calcium from your diet, your body will stimulate certain other hormones that pull the calcium out of the bone and put it into the blood. This weakens the bone. It's a gradual process. It starts at age 30. By the time you're 50 and 60, you're going to have symptoms. You're going to have like spontaneous fractures of the vertebrae in your back. You can even have a hip fracture. So it's very important for both men and women who are vegans to you can get calcium from some vegan foods, but you have to again be aware of this and eat the vegetables that do contain calcium. Uh, Another thing that's probably highly lacking in vegan diets is vitamin D. But then again, vitamin D is also lacking in people who eat animal protein foods because the only reliable source is sunlight. It's very hard to get in food unless you eat irradiated mushrooms. I don't know a lot of people that eat irradiated mushrooms. So unless you go in the sun where the sun is at the right spot in the sky for 20 minutes a day, you're going to be lacking vitamin D. So vegans should take about 2,000 units of vitamin D, and you have to eat it with a meal containing fat. Speaking of fat, and a common lack of a certain fat in vegan diets is omega-3 fatty acids, as found in, let's say, fish oil. This is another pet peeve I have because a lot of these vegan advocates always talk about how, "Oh, you don't need to take omega-3, you don't need to eat fish oil because vegetables are loaded with omega-3. Yeah, the type of omega-3 they have is called alpha linoleic acid. And the problem is that is an omega-3 semantically, it's listed as an omega-3. However, it has to be converted into the active forms of omega-3, which is EPA and DHA. And it turns out the human body has a very low capacity to convert ALA or alpha linoleic acid into EPA and DHA. In men, it's about a 3% capacity, goes up to about 10% in women. Women have a greater ability for this conversion, and they think it's because of estrogen. Nobody really knows. But I strongly suggest that vegans consider they do have now vegetarian supplements of omega-3, which are they're derived from algae, so it's not an animal product. You can eat that. You can take these supplements and still maintain your vegan status. Of course, the other thing is protein. You can get enough protein from vegan foods. It's a myth that you can't. But again, the problem is you have to eat a lot of vegan foods to get, if you're involved in bodybuilding or you have any goals of building muscle, you're going to have to eat a lot of vegetables to get enough protein to build muscle. Another problem is that the vegan diets tend to be a little bit low in fat. The fruits and vegetables are usually very low in fat. Now, the problem here is that you need a certain amount of fat to support testosterone metabolism in the body. Most studies suggest it's between 20 and 25% of daily calories must be in the form of fat to support testosterone metabolism. That's a little bit of a problem. However, strangely enough, what the studies have shown is in reality, in other words, this is on more like on paper than in reality, because it turns out that a lot of the vegans, they don't really have, really low testosterone levels. However, most studies show when they compare people that are involved in weight training, vegans do tend to have lower testosterone levels than animal protein eaters, right? Uh, they also tend to have lower levels of another anabolic hormone called IGF-1. That's insulin-like growth factor 1. I don't want to go into detail of IGF-1. I've done that in my newsletter and in other videos. However, it's kind of interesting that the lower levels of IGF-1 are considered a great feature of vegetarian diets, because the vegan advocates talk about how IGF-1 is linked to the onset of cancers of the breast, prostate, and cancer and colon. So they say that the lack of IGF-1 is a feature. What they don't tell you is that IGF-1 is needed to maintain your connective tissue, your muscles, and the neurons of your brain. That's what they don't tell you, but that's another story. Uh, by the way, I want to quickly add here, and I've said this in other videos, I am definitely not anti-vegetarian. I mean, don't get me wrong. I personally am involved in animal welfare. You've heard me talk about dogs in my videos. I would love to be a vegan, especially at this stage of the game. I'm a little older than a lot of you guys. I'm not interested in having 21-inch arms anymore. I want to be as healthy as possible and as lean as possible. And a vegan diet, if it's properly conceived and designed, can probably be one of the most healthiest diets in the world. But it takes some work. It takes some research. You don't just pop a bunch of fruits and vegetables. As you know, as you notice here, there are certain nutrients you have to be conscious of. If you don't, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. In fact, if you don't do a vegan diet correctly, not only will you not gain muscle, but you feel and look like crap. A good example of this is the actress Angela Jolie, who went on a straight vegan diet a couple of years ago, and her weight dropped down to, believe it or not, are you ready for this? 76 pounds. She said she never felt as bad as she did in her life on the vegan diet, and quote unquote, I almost died. So this is an example of a poorly designed vegan diet. It can be very dangerous if it's done wrong, but if it's done right, it can be fantastic. I'm going to have a lot of information on how you can use a vegan diet to actually build muscle if this is your preference. I strongly believe that as you get older, the amount of red meat that you consume should be cut down to a minimum. And I'm going to discuss this in my newsletter. It's very detailed for the reasons why. It's not what you think. It has nothing to do with the fat in the meat. It has nothing to do with cholesterol. It has to do with other factors in meat, which are, again, too complex to discuss here. But I strongly believe that the amount of red meat should be greatly reduced as you, let's say, get past age 50 for health, if you really want to be healthy as you get older. What else can I say? Oh, I wanted to mention something about, another reason why animal protein foods are a little bit superior to vegetarian foods is because vegetarian foods have lower digestibility. Again, a lot of these anti-nutrient factors that found in fruits and vegetables play a role. Some of them inhibit digestive enzymes. For example, animal protein foods have about a 90% digestibility, vegan foods or vegetarian foods vary from 45% to 80% digestibility, and that includes protein. So, even if you're eating a lot of vegan foods, a lot of times the protein is not fully digested. That's another reason why it's a little bit difficult to build more muscle. Well, if you're a straight vegan, of course, then we have the factor of less essential amino acids. I'd like to mention something about the soy protein. I said I was going to talk about that. I'm going to have a huge article in my Applied Metabolic newsletter about all the controversies about soy. Some of them are true, some of them are not. And I'm going to, for the first time, I'm going to detail everything. So anyone reading that article will be completely cognizant. You'll know all the truth about soy. But let me say at this point, some studies have compared. Well, let me backtrack. Soy protein is one of the few plant proteins that actually has all the amino acids. Most vegan sources of protein are lacking one or two or more of the essential amino acids. The most common amino acids lacking in vegetables, for example, are the amino acids lysine and methionine. So those are lacking, and because of that, the proteins have not only less digestibility, but when a protein is low in essential amino acids, it more or less passes right through you. It's not really used for muscle protein synthesis. That's a real problem. Now, if you study, this is what I meant earlier about having to do research. If you decide to be a vegan, if you study the various sources of protein, vegan protein sources, you'll find some foods are high in methionine, some foods are high in lysine. If you eat these foods together, the problem is solved because one kind of supplements the other. I don't recommend taking methionine supplements because methionine is a double-edged sword. I'll talk about again. This is going to be a subject in my Applied Metabolics News. Methionine is associated with more rapid aging in animals. It actually accelerates the aging process. It's a little bit, again, a little bit complex, too complex to talk about in a video, but you want to get that only from food, right? Now, another problem with the soy protein, what I was going to say earlier, is that there's a lot of studies that you'll hear about where they compare soy with whey protein, and some studies show an equal amount of muscle building effect or muscle hypertrophy effect. Most of the studies, however, when soy is compared head on to a whey protein, it turns out the whey protein almost always proves superior. And again, a lot of it has to do with the increased amounts of essential amino acids in the whey protein, and the greater, I think soy protein is about 8% leucine, whereas soy protein is, I believe it's something like 16% leucine, and that difference makes the difference in muscle hypertrophy. But there's another problem with soy protein they found is that when you ingest soy protein, a lot of the protein is kind of like absorbed by your internal organs called the splanchnic circulation. It's used for protein synthesis of your internal organs, like your intestine and all that stuff. It doesn't really get to the muscles. So a large percentage of soy protein is used again to stimulate muscle protein synthesis in the internal organs rather than muscle. So that's a problem. Now, I will say real quickly, don't believe the crap about soy knocking out your thyroid and lowering your testosterone. Those things happen only with massive amounts of soy protein. You'd have to eat a huge amount of soy protein. There's articles all over about, oh, soy lowers your testosterone. It knocks out your thyroid. Bullshit. It's bullshit. Small amounts of soy do not do that. However, unfortunately, soy, when compared to, let's say, animal protein like whey, not as good as a muscle builder, no matter what you read. And let's see, what else can I say here? I would also, I'd suggest if any of the vegan people, if they want to if they opt to use those natural protein supplements that I mentioned earlier, let's say pea protein, rice protein, hemp protein, you might want to also add a little extra leucine to that, because all of these supplements are a little bit low in leucine. And again, as I said earlier, leucine is the key to muscle protein synthesis. You can buy leucine as a standalone supplement. And what I would do is if you take those vegan protein powders, add anywhere from 3 to 4 grams of leucine to each drink, and I think you'll notice a huge difference. If you do that, you'll probably get you probably could actually get away with ingesting. You won't have to take 40 grams of the protein. You could probably take about 30 grams and get the same effect if you add the leucine. So what else can I say? That's it. I give this is a little bit longer, this video, but I felt I needed to give some, there's a lot of myths about the vegan diets. And again, I'm going to talk about this. I've been planning to write this article about vegan nutrition in relation to bodybuilding and fitness for at least about a year and a half. But the information, the data I've collected is so voluminous, it would take me, and I'm not exaggerating, I mean, I've got like boxfuls of it. It would take me like a week just to read this stuff. So I haven't been able to do this. In fact, I might just decide to make it into an ebook rather than an article because there's so much information involved. I even found out, for example, why a lot of people who start vegan diets can't stay on it. It has nothing to do with the factors I mentioned earlier. It has to do with factors that almost nobody knows about. It has to do with certain little genetic quirks where certain people go on vegan diets, they get very ill. Nobody has ever talked about this. I'm going to talk about it. So maybe you guys could do me a favor. If any of you would be interested in reading a book about all the nuances of vegan diets, how to use them healthfully, how to use them to build muscle if that's what you want to do. If I should put this in an ebook, please, under this video, mention this in your comments if you'd be interested in that. And if enough people are interested, then I will write an ebook on this. It'll be like nothing that's ever been written about this stuff. So thanks for listening. And by the way, if you want, as I said several times, if you want further information about nutrition, exercise, science, in depth, hormonal therapy, anti-aging, fat loss research, ergogenic aids, all of those things in depth, complete, total information, no advertisements, please subscribe today to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. I guarantee, I promise you that you will learn something in every issue that you don't know. And if you subscribe to my newsletter for a couple of months, you yourself will be an expert. You will know things that just about no one else knows except those who read my newsletter. Anyway, take care and take care.